All right, I'm going to call the September 22nd meeting of the Riverfront Improvement Commission to order. Steve, can you tell us, along with the members who are present, if there is a commissioner on the phone?
So we are joined on the phone. Let's see, there aren't any commissioners tonight, but Teresa Stedelman and Laura Merritt, both with HR Green, have joined us virtually, yes. And we'll get to that in a moment. And then Alderman Lee has joined us as well, and Jerry Nagel with Communications, City Communications is there as well. Can you all hear us? I guess if I unmuted, it would help.
Yeah. All right. So everyone can hear us?
Yes, they've just self-muted, so.
Okay, perfect. Before we talk about the minutes, I just wanted to take a brief minute to say that Steve today got a phone call from Ryan Reed. He has gotten a new job, and he is going to Kansas City. So we're losing our secretary, and we wish him well. It's kind of exciting for him. While this is a mayor's appointment, and so I'm sure the mayor will be looking for a person to replace Ryan, I also want all of you to think about, we need to fill in the secretary position of the commission. So I believe you have my email and maybe phone number. So if someone is interested, I'd love to hear from you between now and maybe a week before the next meeting, if that's possible. All right, so I think we're ready for approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion? Kelly moves. A second?
Second.
A discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah. Steve, I'd like to add to the minutes the discussion we had on the Black Hawk and the Indian statues that they were talking about. And I asked them to look at maybe a different name than Black Hawk War Memorial, at least drop the war out of it. And
at River Heritage Park. That
River Heritage, yeah, there's nothing in here about the River Heritage Park discussion on.
Well, I think there is, but there is no discussion in the minutes. So you would like that to be reflected under the discussion?
Well, we discussed it last meeting, yeah. I'd like to add that to the minutes.
Okay, so that's an amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a second. So we'll vote quickly on that amendment to the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, if there's not anything else, then let's vote on the minutes themselves as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No? Okay. All right, we're done. I'm going to take the liberty to move some things around in the agenda, if you're okay with that. We do have representatives from Howard R. Green here to talk to us about their flood study. Steve and I discussed the idea of having them early before a lot of work is done, so the commission could learn about their study, but also that they could learn about the commission and our role on the riverfront and what our position is on the riverfront and our authority in that we manage this piece, we plan for this piece, and a lot of their work really is in the same ground. And so we should give some of our upfront thoughts about maybe what we would like to see. Their work is going to be more ground level of flood elevation, flood mitigation, sustainability, I believe. That's what they're going to talk to us about when we can be clear on that. But I think as commissioners, we have the responsibility to understand what's going on with the study. We have Steve as a staff person, along with other staff members that are working with Howard R. Green, which I think is excellent. in that we will be able to have some monthly communication on how it's going. So I think this is a good time. I hope you all came with some thoughts. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, if you want to maybe introduce them a little bit more, and we'll see how this goes.
Absolutely. So I think I had heard one of them, I think it was Teresa, a moment ago. And so as they set up, they joined us virtually. Teresa Stadelman and Laura Merritt are both with HR Green, at least the flood study component. They can talk a little bit about how that is structured organizationally. As Dee was saying, the idea is really to have them walk through for us what that process looks like. It's like a year-long process, and it's pretty far-reaching, and they're very interested in collecting stakeholder feedback, and they've just basically, the city has just launched this initiative a couple weeks ago, and so they were very happy to participate with us this evening to give us a little bit of a brief summary of what's in store, but then also to receive some feedback from the Riverfront Improvement Commission. So with that, Teresa?
Sure. Am I able to share my screen?
Yeah, that's what we want. That's what I want. I hope so. Steve is trying to make that happen right now.
Okay, I did send the request, so hopefully that popped up for him.
Do you have that connected to the screen up here?
Well, I can see your screen now.
Hey, Jerry, are you still there? I don't know how to make her
Under the presenter, you should see my request, and you can either grant or not grant me the okay in your go-to-meeting sidebar controls.
Yeah, is that going to get up on video then?
It's in that little side menu that should have popped up on one of your screens. Well, maybe not. That's too bad. We had prepared some slides for you guys, but do you think it's going to work or no?
We're getting closer. But it might get better than right now.
Where
Right
I
now.
can't see because I don't have my glasses. Where this little like the little red like one. It looks like there's a notification in the chat. Can you click on that?
That's the chat button.
Hey, so Jerry, okay.
What about the third one down?
It could also be the triple dot icon, top right.
Yeah.
Which one?
Maybe click on that.
Or it could be the 5 participants thing too, you might be able to give them control.
The 5-person thing?
Yeah.
You want to hit that one, Steve?
There we go. Okay, I believe you can all see my screen now, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Like Steve mentioned, my name is Teresa Saleman. I'm with HR Green. I'm the project manager for the overall flood resilience plan study that we're just getting underway. With me today is Laura. Laura is actually with Sasaki, and she is here because she's leading our stakeholder engagement elements and land use planning elements of the study. And so I thought it'd be good to invite Laura to be here with us, and especially to talk to the commission here, as there's a lot of overlap there. Just to give you a general overview of the full project, you know, the city has asked us to look at basically the entire riverfront. We're looking at 7 different segments of the river, from McClellan to Mound, Bridge to Fourth, Fourth to Gaines, Gaines to Marquette, Marquette to Division, Division to Concord, and then also upstream a little ways on Blackhawk and Walnut Creeks. So you see it really covers that entire riverfront from McClellan down to Concord. And each of these 7 different areas, you know, of course, are unique in, you know, the current land use, the current flood mitigation strategies that are underway there, the current operations that need to occur during different flood events. As to our approach to the study, there's really 6 main elements that we're looking at. Public and stakeholder engagement is an important element in that we're reaching out to various different audiences, individuals, stakeholder groups within the city, groups like the Riverfront Improvement Commission and others. Land use planning is another piece of that, where we're looking at how is the land being used along the riverfront? Is that a viable land use? Are there improvements that can be made in land use along the riverfront? We are, of course, doing the engineering side of this, which really is the mitigation alternatives analysis, where we look at it, are there different strategies that could be used to mitigate against flooding and to make the city more resilient. We're reviewing operations, and so this is during a flood event, what takes place, what actions is the city taking to keep, you know, commerce going and to close parks and things that they need to do during a flood operations, detour traffic, etc. Transportation, safety, and mobility really ties into all of these. You know, transportation ties into land use, it ties into flood operations, it ties into anything that you might change in terms of infrastructure. And then finally, the 6th element is funding and implementation strategy. And so for that, you know, you can come up with a great plan, but if you don't have a way to fund it and you don't have a plan on how you're going to implement it over time, it's not going to do much good. It's just going to sit on the shelf. So those are the 6 elements of this study that we have underway right now. So I'll just touch briefly on them, but stakeholder engagement, you know, I talked about all the various audiences that there are in the city and how we reach out to them. This has been a topic of discussion quite a bit early on here, you know, with the COVID situation. We need to kind of rethink how we've traditionally done stakeholder engagement. The days of the in-person large open house are really not something that's going to work anymore. And so we're looking for a balance of online or virtual strategies with more traditional paper surveys. We've also talked about, you know, how do we meet people where they are, you know, maybe on some pop-up booths, street side, schools, that sort of thing. But also really utilizing technology that we have, like some very cool online surveys and giving people lots of ways to interact and provide input and get data. So that's kind of where we're going with stakeholder engagement. We're also talking about how we have that in various waves. Obviously, we're early on in the study now, and so this is really a data gathering phase, a visioning phase, but later on there'll be, you know, additional phases where we reflect back information that we've gathered and that we gather input from all these different stakeholders on different items that we may be proposing or alternatives that we're putting out there. Land use planning, a lot of this is thinking about great ways to live with the great resource that is the Mississippi River, right? How do we use land along the riverfront where it's a great destination and it's a place people want to go and recreate, but also is resilient? And so here's just a few examples, that we've presented before, but, a great amphitheater locale that also is floodable. And that kind of idea of using spaces in ways that, yes, it works with the river and we know that it will flood, but they're resilient materials. It's easy to clean up when you're done with a flood event and put it back into its everyday use. Flood mitigation alternatives. This is talking both about infrastructure. When you think sometimes about flood mitigation, you might think about flood walls, pump stations, green infrastructure, storm sewer improvements, that kind of thing, but also different strategies for flood mitigation, which might be preserving natural resource areas. It may be voluntary buyouts, elevating or moving structures out of the floodplain. Flood proofing, like that was done at Credit Island at the lodge, where buildings are allowed to flood, but then are more easily returned to use. These are all different types of strategies that we look at in flood mitigation. Flood operations, this is, again, about all those activities that take place during a flood event. It has to do with the materials and the labor that need to go into working around a flood event, and the strategies that go into that, and the cost. What is the repetitive cost year after year of reacting to these flood events? Like I said, transportation goes into all of this. This transportation could be transportation as it is now, but especially transportation as it is during a flood event when we start enacting detour routes. How do people get to where they need to get to downtown? That sort of thing. It also has to do with not just cars, but pedestrians. If trails are underwater or not available, are there other places for pedestrians and bicyclists to go? So that kind of all falls under that transportation, safety, and mobility piece. And then finally, funding and implementation. So part of the study that we're working on will be to identify both local funding match sources and outside funding options that can meet the needs of the project going forward. Some of this is, identifying those ancillary improvements that maybe come with different funding buckets that can be tied together with flood mitigation. Maybe there's a road project, but it's also a flood mitigation project, and there's different pots of funding and grants and things that you can apply for. The funding strategy really has to focus on implementation, with realistic goals of how much funding may be available over what time frame, so that pieces of the plan can go forward. Obviously, early coordination is important. Clay and I were discussing earlier, grant opportunities that are coming up in the next year and how those may play into some of the work that we're doing. So that's important to come up with that strategy too of how do we apply for funds that may be out there. And then, we want to move quickly, and, we're working over the course of approximately a year here. But in the past, when there's been great economic upheavals, like after 2008, there was stimulus funding that came out and was available. And so we want to help the city prepare for any potential stimulus funding that may become available. And so all of these elements really fit together here. And this is just kind of a nice matrix of all these different study areas. And, we have looked at what are some of the key assets within that area. How is the land used now? What are the transportation challenges maybe in the area or opportunities? We look at the flood mitigation, both in a permanent sense, but also in an operational sense of how much manpower needs to be deployed to a certain area during a flood event. And then we've been working with the city to identify those key constituents within each of those areas, how we might best conduct outreach to those groups so that we can get their input and we can communicate information with them throughout the study. So a little bit of a progress update for you. We've been underway for about a month and a half or so. at this point. And so a number of activities are underway, although we're still rather early in the process. A lot of what we've been doing is data collection, obviously getting information from the city on all different types of mapping, on the operations plan during flood events. We've been looking at previous studies that have been done along the riverfront, so just kind of gathering all that information. We've also been having a number of meetings with city staff, including public works, operations, communication, again, doing a lot of data gathering, but also getting their ideas and incorporating that, city staff input into what we're looking at. We've done a couple site visits, mostly focused on looking at operational areas and existing infrastructure. We've been working on our engagement strategy, defining, with the city what the goals are of the engagement strategy, what the schedule is for these different various waves of engagement over the course of the study. Especially in COVID, what is our strategy to reach as many people as we can and who those audiences are. And then finally, a lot of analysis. So right now, quite a bit of analysis is underway in different areas, looking at, the current infrastructure, looking at the current operations work that's going on. So that's kind of where we are at this point. Like I said, about a month and a half into the work of the study. To give you an idea of sort of the overall schedule here, so we're middle to end of September. And, we're about to begin that first wave of engagement, again, about gathering information and visioning, and that's about to start. We've also, completed most of our data collection to this point, both from land use planning standpoint, but also from the existing infrastructure and existing flood operations plan standpoint. And we're really starting to dive into that analysis piece of that. That's kind of where we are on the schedule. We are looking to finish this up by the end of next summer. And so there's going to be a lot of ongoing activity. And like was mentioned earlier, Steve is in monthly progress update meetings, and so can be a great conduit of sharing information back with the commission about what's going on. And, we're talking today, but, it's likely that we'll have other opportunities to talk in the future and be gathering additional input. And that's just kind of the overview of what we're doing with the study and where we're at. And we'd really like to just maybe have some discussion at this point, both to know maybe, what some of the ongoing initiatives of the Riverfront Improvement Commission are at this time, the areas that sort of engage with our study area, which is probably everything. So I guess I could open it up for questions, but I definitely want to hear from you as a group about what some of your priorities are.
Teresa, this is Dee Bremer. I'm chairing, so I'll try to funnel these to you. I think before we maybe give you some of our feedback, I would like you just maybe to give me a better understanding of the visioning phase. What are we visioning? So you talk about land use planning, and you show us a number of different slides that look like parks and other areas where flood mitigation has happened. I'd like to know maybe really what is that visioning phase? What do you see that an end product of that to be?
Yep, I'm going to let Laura jump in because I think she'll give a more complete answer.
Sure. So we're really taking a look here at, the kind of resilience and flood management strategies and thinking about how those come together with the land uses along the riverfront. And so, in many examples like those shown, that's really about, a lot of engaging what you all do, which is thinking about how we can create resilient parklands along the riverfront, as well as looking at the other land uses that are happening there and understanding, what's viable, what's working well today, and how can we really improve the connectivity happening along the riverfront, the sort of recreation opportunities, and the way that people are connecting, with the riverfront, of course. And so, we've been studying up on the previous plans that have been done and the many kind of great plans that are underway for the riverfront in Davenport, and we'll be, factoring those into this study. And really just, again, want to hear from you in terms of your initiatives and areas of emphasis and opportunity.
All right, so let me see if I really understand this. You'll be looking at, say, the most recent plans of Main Street Landing, and not really is Main Street Landing and those plans right, but how can they be implemented in a way that is resilient? Or are we going to do a somewhat do-over?
No, the intent isn't to do a do-over. It's to, to build on the work that's been done and to incorporate the resilient strategies that are emerging from the flood planning study and sort of, build on the work that's done to date.
Okay, I don't want to take over the conversation. I'm going to first open it up to others on the commission that maybe want to give some feedback on what we do and what we see important on the riverfront and things that they should think about as they go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly?
Yeah, this is Kelly Grubbs. I'm one of the commissioners. I'm curious, one of the things that we've been talking about from a planning perspective is how we engage the Corps of Engineers and looking at the DNR and some of the other potential funders and partners for us in some of our long-term strategies on the western edge of our riverfront. And so are those, I guess I'm wondering, how do those thoughts and potential discussions fold into what your planning would be? Does some of your planning and what you're going to come out with include sort of action steps in terms of thinking of things like that? Or I'm just curious how those concepts would fold in.
Yes, our intent would be to develop actionable plans. And, some of those may include partners like the Corps or the DNR where, we could really, there's some synergies or maybe there's some funding opportunities or just some common goals that we could work together. So definitely, yes, the idea is to come up with actionable goals and plans and strategies for more resilience. I know at the western end, there's been discussion of, kind of around Credit Island and around the slough there and what goes on in that area.
So maybe to bring you up to date, the commission has on our strategic plan, planning what we call River West. And River West is really Marquette Street down past Credit Island and really now really to the river, to the city's edge. That group, the commission, along with the Parks Advisory and Parks staff members and Nahant Marsh, the watershed, the partners of the watershed, the core group, we've been just started engaging in our visioning and strategic look at that area of how we would like to look at it at a high level. And most of it really is a lot about resilience, but a lot about keeping it natural and its environment. So how will our work that we're doing over the next several months fit into your work?
I would just chime in to say that Teresa, I'll start, but build on what I'm saying here. I think we really would like to, knowing that you're already doing outreach in that area, we're just starting to, as Teresa mentioned, work with the city to identify key stakeholders and launch a first wave of outreach and information gathering. So it would be, wonderful to align those efforts and, really fold the work that you're doing into, to inform this study as well, both from a content perspective and also from a stakeholder outreach perspective, so that we're not, hitting people with multiple efforts, but rather really drawing on the outreach you're doing.
Yeah, I see some of our end product work from this group will be to have a better understanding kind of the slough and the harbor, the waterways, water quality of Black Hawk Creek, really looking at the fisheries and all those things along the river And those kinds of smaller studies that we also have the DNR fishery guy with us, and there's things that they can do. So we were going to list all of those out as potential things to do to have us have more knowledge that if we want to go ahead and plan for this area, we would know what's doable. And so I would hope that we could figure out how this can feed into what you're doing, because I don't think you're going to be quite that on the ground on a couple of these areas in terms of, what fish is out there and, what's ice fishing. And I mean, we're trying to go fairly detail in that portion of the river.
That's great. That would be excellent to inform and fold in.
Yep, and that's honestly similar to other groups that we're working with ongoing studies. Silver Jackets is doing a study on elevation of structures and impact of structures that are being flooded, and we are waiting on that study to complete here in the next couple months, and then using that data to inform what we put into the study and plan here.
I might talk about the commission's role, and if you've looked at our agenda, you can see that we are actually landlords on property that floods, that's on the riverfront. We have two main buildings, but we have many buildings that we're the landlord and we have tenants of. And so we're very anxious that we can find mitigation plans to keep these buildings occupied as long as possible and to keep transportation to them as long as possible. So, in the last flood, we had a little bit of a dilemma where the freight house literally had, its parking lot was out of the water and you could get to it, but the roads were closed because River Drive was closed in each direction. And I'm sure you're going to some of that, looking at their plans and looking at that, but as a landlord, we would like you to be especially diligent in these two areas. The other thing that we've looked at, and some of the plans I've looked at, is that literally maybe another building by the Sky Bridge that could be built. And what would that mean, and how far out of the water would it have to be, and kind of how would that work in a resilient way? I think we would be really interested in hearing you guys' opinions of that. I don't think, again, we don't want to redo the RDG plan or the Hargreaves plan, but the work that you do, how can you make those big ideas happen in a way that if we fundraise and we got those projects accomplished, at 19 feet, we weren't worried about them. Or even maybe at 20 feet, we weren't worried about them. So, you got some other comments?
I do.
Okay, Pat.
This is Pat Walton from the commission. Dee mentioned Nahan Marsh. Is Nahan Marsh part of the study? It didn't show up at first. Nahan Marsh is on the west end and retains a lot of floodwater.
Yeah, the marsh itself is not part of the study, but they are one of our key stakeholder groups to be in discussions with.
They're actually doing some master planning there at the marsh as well. And so our River West planning is connecting in with them as well.
Right, yep, I understood that they were beginning a large master planning effort.
Teresa and Laura, I appreciate you. I know this is past probably your normal work time. I'm glad that you had an opportunity to stay here with us. We're looking forward to your work in a number of ways. I used to be the public works director at the city for a lot of years, and so I'm very anxious to see your analysis and your data work in terms of the riverfront and what we can do. I think there's just great possibilities, but I do believe that there's time when you need to mitigate, and there's times when you need to take a playground and maybe move it to higher ground. And when we do higher ground, Centennial West is a good example of those shelters when 10 years, 15 years ago, we thought 19 feet would be an okay location for them. not really understanding climate change at that point. And we know that we not only have to plan for last year, 2 years ago flood, but for floods a decade from now. And so I'm kind of excited to see this work. I am so appreciative that the council has funded it and it is underway, because then it allows all of us dreamers to be able to dream real big. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, thank you.
Bill Churchill, one of the commissioners, is there a possibility that we could get access to your presentation tonight so that we could look at it? I realize it's real early on, but nonetheless, it would, I think, be helpful for some of us to see what you've discussed tonight on your presentation and maybe look at it in a little more detail, so we might have some better input in the future.
Teresa, can you email that to Steve?
Yeah, I'll work with Steve to get it to him.
Perfect.
That's fine.
No, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Anything else? All right, we'll move on to the agenda. The next item is approval of the disbursements.
So moved.
It's a motion and a second, Kelly and Pat. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign? We're good. All right. All right, we'll go down to the leases. Steve, I'm going to let you kind of take us through the Nestle Purina that we heard about last time.
That's exactly right. This is the second review of this renewal with Nestle Purina. It's for the graveled parking lot along West River Drive, essentially just downstream from Sturdivant, basically. And so if there aren't any questions, this is a 3-year holding the amount, the term rent amount. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, you would seek action this evening.
Any questions of Steve? Is there a motion then? What? Go ahead, Pat.
Under CPI projects, is that West River Drive is that the seal coat for 30,000? Is that for this area?
Later in the agenda, the CIP projects, that is a seal coating for this lot, but it's likely to be a few years away from funding.
It's gravel now, right?
It's gravel now.
And doesn't the stormwater regulations of the city say no gravel lots? I just thought so. Okay. All right, is there a motion to approve this lease?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Was Bill. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Okay, it is approved. The next lease is the diner. This is a 1-year renewal.
Yeah, so Tara Elkins, the owner of the diner, which is located at the Freight House. Check it out if you haven't already, but she has joined us this evening. Tara has been there for going on 2 years, and actually opened up sort of against the perfect storm of items. A new business opening in the winter, having record flooding a few months later. This year, we've had lots of construction, road closures, COVID, you name it. There are a myriad of things going on. Not to make excuses, she would be the first to say that. But we have talked about renewal, which we're up for at this point, and with a balance owed still, a good way of catching up and moving forward. And so the idea of a term being, instead of a 2-year renewal, doing a 1-year renewal and just, working together to see how we can continue to move forward. We think that Tara will explain a little bit that the tide is turning a little bit, she feels, and that it's, starting to see a little bit of increase in business, and all of that is good. And so we certainly, as landlord, want to see her succeed and want to see this particular business continue to add to the ambiance of the Freight House District, as we like to call it. So Tara, with that, if you would like to address the commission briefly, and if there are any questions, I can try to answer them.
Sorry, I got emotional, so sorry, starting. We opened during the polar vortex, and being a new business in a destination area, it was very hard. And then we were hit with the flood, and we had to close for a total of about 2.5 months. And then when we were able to reopen, we were still surrounded by water, and a lot of our guests would have to park, across the street, walk all the way down, come to the boardwalk. It was very hard to access us for a long time. So then we had all the road construction and COVID. We closed for 2 months for COVID. So I'd say about 6.5 months of our almost 2 years of being open, we've actually been closed. But we still show up. We're still there every day, trucking along, trying to stay positive. And, it's every time that we were able to build momentum, something else would take us down. But we are becoming a staple restaurant in the Quad Cities. And, every day is getting busier. Every week is getting busier. Every weekend, we're completely packed. We're on a wait. If you check out our reviews on Facebook, we are 4.5 stars. Everybody loves to come visit us. I've been in this industry for over 20 years. And 2 years ago when I met you guys, I never knew I was going to be walking into all these trials and tribulations. But like I said, I still love it. And, I'm not ready to give up yet. So I thank you for letting me come and talk to you. We've employed about 30 people, and a lot of them have stuck with us through the flood and through COVID, where they didn't have unemployment. And I think that says a lot about our integrity and how we treat our staff. And so I would like to also keep them employed. And if you guys have any questions for me, I'd love to answer them. I don't think I'm missing anything else. There's been a lot of deep and dark, scary days being a new business owner, but no matter how hard it gets, like I said, I'm still showing up and working hard and just trying to get through all this. So thank you very much.
Tara, so this 1-year extension of the lease, you're agreeable with that? And
Yes.
some working on figuring out kind of the back rent that you may owe going forward?
Yes.
You've been hit with more curves than most new businesses. So the flood, your higher elevation, you could get there if we only knew that people could get there, if only the roads were open to get to you. So that was a dilemma. Your major door, which is the one really right off of River Drive, has not had access literally for most of your time. It's either been underwater or it's been under construction. It's very difficult because people don't realize they could park behind and just come in the back door. So you've had a lot of issues, I think, going on, and you have a huge space that you rent, but you can't really utilize.
Yeah, that's another thing too.
It is an awkward space, and for those of you who may have been down there, while the diner is upstairs, all that space that you come into to get to the elevator, all that square footage is also her business, but how do you have a diner on that floor? It's just a very difficult space. We've had a hard time figuring out what to do there. Not really any capital improvement, because you definitely got to have an elevator to go up.
Yeah.
And so how do you make that all work? So I think before we come back next month, and maybe it's the following month, Steve, I think we should work with Tara on looking at those impediments and see how we can work with her to remove those, and then also look very cleared-eyed how the diner may be slightly different than the other businesses in the Freight House in terms of that Ripley Street construction. I mean, you can't, even if you go to, you want to park in the Ethiopian lot, you can't really get across the street.
Right.
So it's a really tough, you've had a tough time. And I'm hoping the news, it should be opening all soon, and, life gets back to normal, and next year's floods 15 feet would be really, really great. But we should be looking at that maybe and giving us some options that she's acceptable with going forward.
I'd be happy to sit down with Tara.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
We'll see what happens next month.
All
Thank you,
right.
Tara.
Thank you very much, everybody.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving ahead, the next item is the first review of Front Street Brewery at the Freight House, and this is also holding the line on any increase in rent for a 3-year renewal period, which is what we have done typically. Any change in here, I mean, there are no material changes except to note to you that we have brought together what we had an addendum for the larger space, and I brought this total of 3,100 square feet together instead of splitting those two apart, because they've now expanded into there. They're using it as such, and it's just easier upon renewal to treat it from a lease agreement standpoint that same way. And so of course, the process, just to refamiliarize you all with this, the process, as I put a draft together, I always include the tenant in this, and Tim Baldwin is fine, he's reviewed it, and then I also always send it to our legal department and risk for any changes in particular insurance coverages and expectations that we have. And so when you receive it, you are receiving it with that feedback included, or at least that having been sent out. And then, of course, this will be up for a vote, much like the diner next meeting, if there aren't any questions tonight.
Are there any questions from the commissioners on this lease? No? All right. Kelly?
I don't have a question. I just am glad that we're able to bring them together into one lease as opposed to having those spaces separately. So that's helpful.
Okay. I think then no discussion means you can bring it back.
Yep, absolutely. So the next item D under leases is what we're calling Miracle at the Freight House. This is hopefully for action tonight as well. But we are joined, Lars Reinberg and Ethan, catch me your last name? Bailey? Ethan Bailey are here with, to kind of talk to us about this very cool, short-term, holiday-themed bar. Honestly, it's pretty exciting. As I looked through, you might, I don't want to steal your thunder, you go ahead. But as we've talked through it, and what we're looking at is for the months of November and December, the space formerly occupied by the Fresh Deli at the Freight House would use that space for this holiday-themed bar, for lack of a better term, but I think you presented it that way. So yes, before it gets asked, we also have engaged with the a part of the Freight House Farmers Market. It's not quite ready, and so we're working in partnership with Freight House Farmers Market, so we're not doing any agreement sort of on top of another. Might seem like that to you all today, but honestly, this is working in concert, getting the space ready for this use for a couple months, concluding the year, and then looking into the first part of the year to be able to open as we once thought and still plan to, with that farm to fork kind of setting connected to the Freight House Farmers Market. So with that, Lars, Ethan, Mike is yours.
Sure. I work for a company called Cocktail Kingdom in New York, and we're in our 7th year of a franchise called Miracle. And the idea is that we bring a lot of holiday joy into an area. We decorate the whole interior with sort of a combination of the Macy's, department store and your family living room. And so you go in, you have like these really nice cocktails, enjoy like decor. It's just kind of a little bit overwhelming inside with the music and everything going on. And it's been very successful everywhere that we've opened up. I've been excited to bring one here since I moved to Davenport about 4 years ago. We've just been kind of looking for the right space. And it's kind of hard, not being bar owners, to find the right space to do something like this, because it is a very temporary pop-up. It's kind of the thing that you can go to after dinner, before dinner, just come down, have a couple nice drinks with your partner, and not a hangout spot. Very much just kind of come through, have the experience, and tell your friends about it later. So this seemed to be like the perfect spot, and we're really excited to bring it. It's going to bring a lot of foot traffic down to this area in November, December. We're excited to drive a lot of traffic to downtown, and we think it's going to bring some pretty big crowds.
Thought it would be an excellent year to bring it because there's no festival of trees.
Right.
So it's a Christmas themed downtown, something to draw people. Proven business model. There will be over 200 of these pop-ups this year. Internationally too, right? Canada, Europe, Mexico.
COVID might have knocked those numbers down
Might
closer to
knock those numbers
125,
down a
but
little
yeah, we
bit.
were on track for 200 for this year, but
The
yeah.
cocktails themselves are developed in New York City by professional mixologists, so they're top notch.
And we batch them all together ahead of time. So there's about 12, 14 choices on the menu. We're not doing anything off menu.
So it's by the drink.
Yeah.
Cocktails only. We're not doing beer or wine or anything. It's just a pop-up, just a themed, come in and have a Christmas experience. Oh, really? Okay,
Heavy
maybe
one
one beer, okay. We've applied for a Class C liquor license at the state level. That has gone through and has hit the dram shop verification, which got verified because we've also secured a general liability policy and a liquor liability policy. All of the local paperwork has been turned into Sherry as well. So we're trying to cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's.
So you probably need a lease to be able to do all that.
We probably do.
So that means that we have action this evening, commissioners. Okay, in terms of COVID, how do you
Yes.
think that's gonna?
Right, so I did I got a CAD drawing from Steve, and I laid our layout on top of the CAD drawing to determine with 6-foot distances what our capacity is. And we determined that we really think we can only fit about 40 people in there with social distancing. So then we did the math on that to see if it could still be profitable and we could still make it work, and we absolutely can.
Wow.
Yeah. 40. Yeah, that's it. It's all table, it's about a dozen tables, and it's all gonna be table service. We're not gonna have people sitting at the bar, is what we determined from looking at the actual distances. We can't, no standing room, no, we can't.
One, with any luck, we might have a mild beginning of winter, perhaps.
Yes.
In November or part of December, so.
And you'll start cocktails at lunch, is that what I'm gathering, to help us out?
No.
Depending on how bad it is.
We're planning on 5 p.m. to midnight, with possibly a sort of a 3 to 5 window for private parties. Also looking at some limited hours on the weekends to tie in with some farmers market special events kind of thing.
Okay.
And we've talked with them already about the plans for Christkindl Mart, which is happening the first weekend in December. And so there's some interest in some connectivity with those things
absolutely.
already underway.
So to help your 40 people, you could let them go. Can you go outside
Yes.
with the drink?
Yeah.
At the mart, when the Christkindl goes on?
Oh, well, it's more of a deck
Yeah,
thing, but yeah.
yeah. Okay, is there questions? Is there a motion to approve the lease?
So moved.
Kelly moves, a second? Brianna seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, all right. Well, good luck.
Thank you. All right, yes, please all come in. I hope you all come in.
I'm excited, that's so cool.
Did you say 14 different drinks? How many did you say?
Yeah,
Okay.
12 to 14,
Well,
something like that.
times you can go.
They're gonna be good. The menu is very exciting. We will, first week of November, we'll spend decorating, because the decorating will be intense to get it to the level we need it to be. And then the second week of November, we'll have a friends and family soft open to get our staff trained. And so, but you're welcome to come that week.
I will, I'm gonna tell all my friends when you guys open.
Very
Soft
good.
opening. All right,
Thank you so
very
much.
All right, now we're down to projects. Steve's going to come to the podium, and we're going to start with B. I think it has years on it, right? I asked him to put years on it. I asked Steve to put some fiscal years on it, though I still think there's a lot in 2020. We have a capital improvement guy back here, he probably is going, that's a lot of money you guys want.
Yeah.
But maybe you could go over this.
Clay's always great to work with when it comes to our CIP. And so the change, why I just handed this out, I think Dee just alluded to, but we added years that when we input this, entered into the system. This doesn't mean this is how it's going to turn out, but this is what we're thinking, what I'm thinking, and hopefully we'll see what you're thinking as well. Plus, it's just a little easier than when it's grouped chronologically by year. So for some of you, first of all, just to back up, when we deal with the CIP, it's a 6-year CIP. And so you kind of look at some high priority items that you're ready to pursue with some cost estimates and all of those sorts of things. In the first couple of years, first year, second year of that, which is 2022. So that gets confusing to folks too, but we're actually in fiscal year 21 right now. So this is for the discussion we're having right now, then begins a process with entry, goes to the city council, and ultimately with a vote, usually February, March time period. And then July 1 begins fiscal year 2022. But it's a 6-year CIP, capital improvement plan budget. And so we sometimes, place some out there. You'll see that we mostly looked at about half that time period, about the next 3 years. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit briefly about some of these and have a discussion about with any questions you might have. A couple of them will look familiar to you, such as the very first one, the Union Station Package Express building where Taste of Ethiopia restaurant is. There are 2 rooftop units there that are in need of replacement. They haven't died yet. We're trying to make sure that doesn't happen. And so these units are up for replacement. The second item there, Union Station FEMA flood mitigation local share. And so this is that project that we've reported to you all about periodically, and it's looking still very positive. It's in FEMA's hands at this point to receive a permission to move forward. In fact, the latest on that, while I'm here talking about it, is that we had brought Fer Graham into the fold to do a design that placed the amount for that redesign of that area necessitated by the gradient levels of Harrison and Ripley Street railroad crossings and not being able to have vehicular traffic on the south side. So you need some handicapped accessibility into the Package Express building. So we talked about a wraparound deck and add an addition on the west side to allow north side parking and then easy access to the south side entrance. All of that being said, FEMA is looking favorably on this, and the latest is to go to the next stage, and that is for us to spend about $40,000 to do an engineering study that is being requested by FEMA, and I don't think we would be going to that next level if we didn't have some level of confidence through our discussions with them that they're looking pretty positively on our overall plan.
How is that going to be paid for?
And that is Clay. Clay is identifying the funds. I don't know
So
particularly.
this would be something that would go now to the city council?
Yes. Well, no, it's under a certain amount. It doesn't need to, right? And so moving forward.
But we would all be aware of it. So is that part of reimbursables?
I'm not sure the engineering study would be.
I
don't think
maybe he can help.
it is.
Be nice.
I think I answered it for you. So currently, I don't believe that the design itself would be reimbursable, but one of the things we've been in our constant conversation with them about trying to figure out, do we move forward in engineering plannings, is do they actually approve of the mitigation option? We don't want to spend the money if they're not going to then turn around. Obviously, what you think of when you get with FEMA, I'm not saying anything bad, if anyone's listening, but sometimes you don't get the straight yes or no answer. However, we feel that we actually have a good project. That's kind of the feeling we got from them. And so that's what currently it's working way through the internal staff process because it's underneath the council amount for the dollar figure for that design. We're going through that process right now, but I think that's something we're going to move forward with.
I can't imagine that this will not come back cost effective.
Initially, they think so as well,
Yeah.
but until they actually provide us with a definitive yes,
Right.
there is some engineering questions that we can't answer until we actually get into the design.
Perfect.
And they're wanting that,
So we might know this by spring in terms of,
I hope sooner.
Yes, I would certainly hope so. To know definitively by then, yes.
that fiscal year 2022 would be a reasonable place for this project to be?
So my hopes, and I'm gonna state that I don't have the spending authority to do this, but nevertheless, my recommendation to both our city council, our city administrator, and our CFO would be we should be getting some flood funding back from the previous year fund for what we have already spent. So it would be nice if we have it available and if it works out that we use that as our local match. If we can't fit this into the CIP with all the other recommendations that we'll be getting.
This would be nice not to worry about.
It would be, especially if they're potentially covering 80 to 100
Well,
to 100% of it. I mean, that's where we're
I
going.
think we can't get a tenant right now. I mean, a tenant's not easy to get. I think we really need to be able to say to our tenants, we have a building that's flood-proof. You'll be able to get back into the building. It won't be 3 or 4 months from now going through a wet first floor to get there. So that, I mean, to me, it's imperative if we're going to be able to lease that building to do the mitigation.
Thank you.
All right.
Anything else on that one?
No, that's exciting.
It is.
I'm
very-
speaking for the rest of them who have their masks on.
I'm hopeful that that's something that will be able to be constructed next construction season. So we'll see how that goes.
Just to clarify, that's like all of the like Brick Road and all of that stuff that went in, like.
The Union Station, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah,
And
I
then
love
some.
going to
Yeah.
Ethiopia, but
Yeah, that's right.
that parking lot.
Yeah, that's right.
It is so bad.
Wait just a little bit longer.
Yeah, right. I always tell my boyfriend, like, it's not gonna be bad forever, your car is fine, you'll be fixed.
The next item, the next project is the Florian Keene parking lot, electricity and concrete islands. I kind of split these two off. And so the electricity issue, the electrical issue, we've talked about, I think, before with the farmer's market. This is something that they desire because of how they're located, their layout. We utilize the posts, the poles for lighting, and then bring electrical down from them and then use some spider boxes to distribute electricity to those that need it. Obviously, one of the main reasons we do this, or they do this, is due to noise pollution. A lot of generators, it's not a very inviting experience when you have a whole bunch of, a row of vendors using various loud generators. And so the idea here is to outfit a larger area. So there's this ability to expand, almost eliminating generators entirely with some power. It just doesn't exist in that parking lot. It's a large parking lot. This is the stadium parking lot I'm talking about. And so by way of an example, this year when Ripley Street closed because of the railroad crossing restorations, we actually had to ask, and they did, but CP, Canadian Pacific, to fund a sizable generator because we had to move vendors into the Freight House lot and out of the Florian Keene. And actually now, just the last 2 weeks, we've had to, with Ripley Street reopening, we've had to realign and do a new layout entirely. And so the generator has been very helpful in moving vendors many of which like a specific spot every week. And so that is a challenge that many people don't understand, but we've been trying to accommodate and be accommodating, given all of this important and necessary work going on around them. Electrifying, if you will, or putting electrical into a greater area assists us and gives us more flexibility, not only for the Freight House Farmers Market, but other events that could take place and make use of the Florian Keene lot. And so that is important. I think the concrete islands are a little less important, but I bring it up because post-flood, so now 2 seasons, that those islands coming in, if you were Western Avenue extended south of River Drive and into the lot, there's like 6 islands with trees and everything. There used to be mulch and some of those kinds of items in there. Mulch is something that has been very difficult to maintain throughout our park system, especially along the riverfront. And so one possible idea, this is why I disconnected these two from each other, they don't have to be one and the same, but is to rock or concrete those medians in, because at certain levels the flooding becomes an issue, and even managing those through, the weeding, and you know what happens with your own mulch. And so that is one thing to be explored, but we definitely need to do something other than what we currently have from a beautification standpoint upon entry. It was really noticed right in the last couple of months as Ripley Street was closed, and the only entrance in and out has been Western. And so we've received some feedback from how they look.
How did you get this $50,000 estimate?
I had reached out into Public Works, and it was a concrete estimate. It wasn't rock or mulch.
Yeah, that's what it
was a
like.
concrete
So I'm
estimate.
wondering, during the land use planning with Howard R. Green, if they can give us some ideas, and maybe that one can go a year later, and we can get a little bit more of an understanding. I also, that lot that we use it, and a couple of times a week, it really benefits also the baseball stadium, and so there should be some appreciation with the city of what as the landlord for the stadium, how that would work between us.
Yes. So also, as we are gearing up after this very busy year of construction projects on the riverfront, we believe 2021, as COVID is addressed more fully next year, we're all hopeful, right? That the riverfront and special events are going to not only resume, but really, we're preparing that they're going to resume wildly, that people are going to be very excited to be back out into, fresh air in the public, and events are going to resume. And we will be a likely candidate with nothing, no road constructions or hopefully flooding standing in the way. We also know that through the H.R. Green flood mitigation study, which is going through summer next year, and so we won't have those full recommendations. Council will be digesting all of those during the 2021 season year. That Main Street Landing has kind of been paused. There's been a pause on the Main Street Landing development ideas, and that's all fine. But in the meantime, as the flex lot is, going to be available and finally finished in that greater area, what we call Main Street Landing, to have some, for lack of a better term, mobile play stations, some items that we could create, and this may not be necessarily CIP, I readily admit it, but I wanted to share the idea with you first, and that is to have some interactive kinds of, I'm trying to describe, these are large size Jenga, or, some of there's these games that are life size, okay? And so I see them throughout the country at various places, in various places, and what we are wanting to do is activate. Primarily, we need to activate this space, not to the exclusion of other things. These are not permanent things. These are intended to be getting people used to the riverfront reacquainted with this particular area in the short term so that we can hopefully encourage that, to encourage us to move forward with permanent development. And so that's what that particular CIP looks like. It
So
may
is
be
this-
from another funding
Yeah,
source.
I'm wondering if it is a CIP or if it's more programming, and we should be looking at this one in our operating budget.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And
that's
maybe
true.
looking for some help with some other people grant-wise. I think the idea of temporary play on a very flat, hopefully grass someday surface
Right.
in that area as a holdover would be kind of a very nice thing to do. So I think there is some creativity here, but I think this is more of a programming thing that we should look at in a programming sense. So
And
we
I
should
think-
think about adding that to our operating budget.
And I think directly tied to that is that last part of that line, which we call, this concept of extreme cleanup is operationally to be able to find dollars to, take into the springtime of 2021, preparing for that important active year to basically ensure we're ready for it. We need some cleanup. There's a lot of things up and down the riverfront that need addressed, and I think that in a strong extreme cleanup weekend or month-long series of these coming out of the spring could go a really long distance, could really help us out a lot.
Yeah, I know Alderman Grip has been a big advocate of the next room, so to speak, of the Main Street Landing and the play area. Where's that at right now, Kyle? And I assume we're talking about a totally different thing from what this mobile play area is totally different than that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll take that. So as Dee said to the HR Green consultants, we need to get this figured out so our dreamers can start dreaming again. And we have dreamers on the sideline right now. Kathy Wine was here earlier, and there's a frustration with her group that the first bridge is on pause. There's a frustration with myself that Main Street Landing and the destination play area is on pause. There is no timetable right now to take it off of pause. It is really now tied into this study that HR Green is doing. And the timetable for improvements in those big CIP items is really being held up by, we need to know what our flood mitigation plan is now. And once we start to get a better idea of that and the timeline, we'll get a better idea of when we can bring those ideas back. And when that time comes, we need to be ready to sell those ideas to the public again. Now, I will say with this idea, we've gone 2 years now where people have not seen our riverfront as a place to recreate and congregate. And that is what this that Steve has put in is all about, is getting people back down to the riverfront and with a mind that I want to be active on the riverfront, I want to recreate there. And then it's a little bit of induced demand where you see something small, you go down there, and then you say, we really should have something more permanent and better. My suggestion has continued to be something like the park in Boston with the temporary glow-in-the-dark swings that they put at the park. They were so popular, hundreds of adults showed up every night and then demanded that they never take them away. So if we can come up with cool ideas like that, where next year people are coming to the riverfront and then saying, hey, when is Main Street Landing going to happen again? And by that time, we should have an answer.
Right. But we're talking about the HR Green finishing their study by next summer, correct? Somewhere in that category. And this 40,000 for this mobile play station is not till 2022, which is another year away.
2022 starts July 1 of next year.
Correct.
And the HR Green study, we had hoped that they would bring something back to us within the calendar year of 2021. So we had asked prior to a new council taking over in 2022 that we would have direction from them at that point. But to Dee's point, and what Steve said, yeah, you can put this in as a CIP. It might be programming dollars. It might be, it could come from anywhere. The thing is, we've got to start talking about this, and we've got to get it out there that it's something that we want. And if everybody agrees it's something that we want, then we can figure out how we're going to pay for it. And in the grand scheme of things, we can pay for $40,000 of cleanup and some programming with a little bit of infrastructure.
Yeah, here's where I'm at. This is an operating budget. We could look to see how it fits in ours. We can ask for some other funders. Not necessarily do we need to come to the city council and ask for this. I think this is an opportunity for the commission to lead on some programming, not much different than we led on programming by the Freight House. And giving some people a feeling that the riverfront is not forgotten. The other thing is these play stations, they may be permanent, I mean, they may be not. They're also, depending on what you pick, I can see these moving to other places, other parks that are not complete, and then we can have a sharing. And I think that's what we need to think about in collaboration, that this can actually go out and be used other places. So I think it's a good idea.
So this could happen next summer then?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Moving on, River Heritage Park, potable water and electrical, just, this is one of those things that I'm hopeful that as part of this extension, Riverwalk extension project with $1 million that is budgeted in the current fiscal year and will get underway and completed in calendar year 2021, that this could be part of that, I'm hopeful. But in case it isn't, I just wanted to make sure that we are able to match. You might recall that both the American Cruise Lines and Viking provided, I think it was 25 and 30,000 respectively. We've got it in a fund, and this is the type of thing that I think that we could match and make happen more easily, and so that's why it appears here. River Heritage Park needs more electrical and potable water source, not just for the boats that would be arriving, but for any use in that park. So that's what that one is. Next is a roof replacement for the entire Freight House. This is something that, we do what we can with patchwork. It is a 100-year-old building, but I think we're in the next couple of years going to have to seriously consider some roof replacement for the entire building, or likely do it in maybe 2 years, split over 2 fiscal years, but perhaps. Similarly, at the Freight House, specifically the upper level, there's about 20 windows on the east side, so north, east, and south side, around Ripley Street essentially, but the upper level, I got a quote, and all new would be about 60,000 that you see here, but there's also an idea to still keep the basics there and to continue to have that historically significant connection to the building, rebuilding each of them at less cost. And so that's why you have 2 different amounts there, and I'll enter it as accordingly.
Steve, staying with the Freight House, I'm wondering, not maybe, 25. I think we need restrooms, upgrades in the Freight House. Can't close the door. I mean, it really, it needs, we need to bring those restrooms into modern times.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, we're through our operational dollars replacing 10, so a little less than half of all of the toilets this year, and so I won't get into why.
I would just say for
it's a very important project.
Yeah, the diner for sure is like a big room with 2 restrooms, at least the women's. It's just really not.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's more than you could ever decorate from a
Correct.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe look at that and put it out a couple of years or something, so we know that it's holding there.
Absolutely. Next up would be the Leclerc Park band shell. When I talk about stage painting, I'm talking about the back wall of the stage. This also might be able to be handled through operational dollars through parks. I think that's how it's been done in the past. Again, I just wanted to convey my thinking to all of you and some of the projects that are on my mind. It's past due, in my judgment, and looks pretty awful. And so that's something, and probably wouldn't even cost as much as I have listed here, but that's what I'm thinking. Similarly, both for Leclerc and Centennial Parks in particular, the River Walk railing, our historic sort of traditional black railing, has been through a lot of floods and weather and, sun and whatever else, but it needs a coat. It needs refreshed. And every time I walk by there, I actually get stressed because I see that and it just doesn't work for me anymore. So I think that we need to make sure that we're getting that inserted into the CIP sooner than later as well. And then someone brought up earlier, maybe it was Pat, I think, the West River Drive semi-trailer parking, so like a seal coat on that, which also, as you pointed out, Dee, would bring us into compliance with our own ordinance on that matter. So, and then after some consultation as well, I think Dee, you alluded to it earlier, but the Centennial Park play area, which is located basically at the foot of Marquette at Beiderbecke, just to try to give you all that geography next to the restrooms there. That play area was devastated in the flood brought back, but as Dee pointed out, it was built with 19 in mind as far as flood elevation. And should we give some consideration to lifting that up a little bit, to elevating that up? And so that could be one of those future year considerations for a CIP and program.
As I look at, Michael, this would be a good collaboration with parks for them to give us kind of a number and maybe we put it in as the main, owner of it, but for them to help us through where that could be located across the street maybe, or however that would work to be able to keep it out of these smaller floods. So when we can clean up Marquette Street, which isn't that hard, that people can return to that portion of the park. Be nice.
While we're talking about railings, there are two that were several months ago run into, I guess is the best way to characterize it. A car, you might recall, went through the railing into the river. This has been I think we're going on a year and a half or better. Those railings are being restored as we speak. It took a little while through some, I guess, the insurance part of it or risk part of it, but those are underway this week. So just, it was on my mind to share. And what I would encourage, if there aren't any additional, comments or reactions to any of these or additions, maybe in the next, the rest of this week for sure, probably early next week, I'll start inserting it takes a little bit, but we have until I think the 8th of October to complete that entry. And so just, I guess, share any thoughts that you might have about any of these. But this is basically, again, this isn't an automatic. There's a whole process that ensues following that. I'm part of that CIP committee as well, but obviously before it gets to the city council, there's a lot of discussion that occurs for every project. So, and all of them are quality projects, so that's always fun. So with that, anything else on that? Otherwise, I could try to briefly go through some of these others with time clicking away here. We had a very successful initial meeting. I think we've had a meeting here since then, but for the River West group, we had our launch meeting. A lot of different stakeholders at that meeting. We have set our second meeting for October 1st. And we envision, a couple more meetings, but that is, it was really exciting to have a good, robust discussion about River West and in particular Credit Island and the upstream, downstream side ends of Credit Island. And I think that, as was alluded to earlier, connecting that in with both, Nahant Marsh and their master planning, but also more specifically HR Green and what it's doing to help inform, that initiative is critical, is very important if we really want some things to get done. And I think that actionable items with specific timelines are very important, short, medium, and long term. We know the causeway is something that might take a little time, but we also know that so much else hinges on that programmatically and otherwise for greater use of, in particular, Credit Island. And so
Is there a causeway CIP in the city?
I would have to look. I know that next year, there is FEMA money to repair
Right.
the existing causeway, not to replace it, but yeah.
I know when we submitted the grant, the Corps actually gave us an estimate, and I was wondering if Parks or anyone has it. It could be in the future, but it would be nice to have that CIP, even if it's hanging in the future.
Right.
And it's causeway, because then you have, everyone has an understanding that this is a project.
Right.
I think their number was, when you did an actual bridge, was 1.6 million, but there were other options. And I think, as I've been talking with the group as we're in that steering committee, it's really studying what is the best option and what it does to the fish and all those different things. So I just think maybe having one either under Parks or under us would be,
just to have, yeah.
as
I
a
agree.
placeholder out there in the future, would be a good idea.
Good.
From the Credit Island to the shore, which is actually not that expensive, because the bike trail was over to
Yeah,
Concord
1.6
was a
is-
lot more money.
Right.
But it's shorter than you think.
But it hasn't been designed yet and all of that sort of thing, but it would be good to at least have a placeholder in the CIP program. Next, I'll brush over that, because Union Station interior next year, essentially, earlier when I talked about the FEMA piece, is the update. And so we're moving ahead and waiting to hear back, and we're moving forward with that with that engineering study, which is critical to moving forward ultimately with FEMA. And then the Canadian Pacific Railroad crossing, they're working, working, I think, as fast as they can on a lot of these. I will say Ripley Street, while we were talking, I think, opened. It was supposed to reopen. That's a big deal for a lot of our tenants, and they're very excited about that. And then work commences on Harrison Street. That will probably go all the way through November at this point. You may also note, not that all the crossings aren't important to us, but, Gaines is under reconstruction at this point, and River Heritage Park. If you haven't been by River Heritage Park, the access is to be restored, and I think they'll finish probably within about a month, if not sooner, for that. And that is a, sort of hammerhead, sort of acceleration and deceleration lane going into River Heritage.
And they've even started behind the fountain as well, haven't they?
Yes, great. Main Street, I think they're well
They're
past
ready
that.
to lay brick.
Yeah, I think
They put the asphalt down for the.
They're well
brick
into
going
that,
on.
and so a couple of Marquette's been completed. There's a few, but their goal is to be finished yet this year. So
I think if anybody really wants to understand the elevation of the bike path, they have gravel on it, just west of Ripley Street.
Yeah.
So it gives you an idea. Now, they still have to put a top. Is it going to be blacktop? I'm not sure. But that still needs to go on.
Yeah.
So it gives you kind of an elevation idea as it goes through, and that's the lower portion. That next portion is going to be higher, and I think that then will give us as a commission kind of an idea of what could happen between that hot raised bike path and the water edge.
I think, while different, I think that the whole Ripley into the new Beiderbecke area and all of that, it's very nice. It's elevated, it's additional parking, it's a nice viewing area that we didn't have before. There's some real positives to it. So anyway, if you haven't been down there, check it out. I think that's all I have at this point. I know.
All right. Michael, do you have something for us?
The only thing going on now that touches on Riverfront's the restoration, I guess you'd say, of the dog park. So those are always immensely popular. I'm just amazed how well those function with dogs and people. I don't know the time frame on when that will be done, but it's really being upgraded and fixed up a lot. And everybody's excited over that.
Cool.
So that's really good.
So just to let you, I mean, to piggyback here, so what he's talking about is the dog off leash area, the dog park at Marquette, off Marquette, near Biderbeck, so in the same area, is closed and moved a few yards away as a temporary fenced-in area that is acting as a dog park.
that's what that
And I
is.
think it takes us into spring.
Right,
I think
right.
it's a multi-month renovation or, upgrade to the existing one that will resume next summer, I believe.
Right.
Is it upgrading that like concrete slab, like a lot of that stuff?
Yeah,
Or are you talking about like the downtown?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't know the particulars of that, but I can try to find that out. I think that there are some elements that are sort of being removed for safety and otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the main reasons.
Yeah.
Michael, one of you three over there would probably be able to answer this. There's a huge pile of mulch on the old Chi-Chi's restaurant site, and I was told the city owns that property.
I don't know.
Is-
Probably so.
And is that gonna, what's that future use of that area gonna be?
That's the future fire station.
Fire station, yeah, that's it, okay.
Oh, is it? Good.
Yeah, that's right.
You could probably get some good mulch there off that pile. And then in our meeting, we had our elections, and it was kind of interesting because we had people run for offices that didn't announce, and my dark money sources didn't come through. So I'll no longer be your liaison. I'll be vice chairman of the park advisory board. So it was kind of interesting. And I think it took so long, we had so many things that we didn't get all done down to the liaison for this, but I think it will be Tegan Trees, and you'll like her. She's really, really nice gal. So I've enjoyed it. And I'm probably going to, if you don't kick me out, I'll be here sometimes just to listen because I've really enjoyed it, learning what's going on. I love being involved. So it's pardon me? No promise. No.
Thank you.
But I really enjoyed it, and I'm part of the River West thing, so that's exciting too. But I think you'll like her also.
Yeah. We appreciate your due diligence with us. Thank you. All right, that brings us down to public with business to present. So,
Start the timer.
okay, I will, Bill.
Okay. I've been giving a lot of thought to the riverfront over the years, and this is just going to be a very quick thing, and I'll hopefully be able to have a more detailed presentation in the future. Well, anyway, briefly, of course, this is the classic riverfront that we have, and the beautiful portion of it that was built by Bill Peterson, and it's been enhanced by the ballpark and our beautiful Centennial Bridge, and I think that's something we all want to keep. This is a photo I took last year, I think, a year before. And it, as it turns out, it wasn't my intent at the time, but it shows the portion of that beautiful riverfront railing and limestone seawall that's going to be destroyed by the RDG plan. And I think people knew that. They would say, this isn't something we want. And it wasn't something that ever was in the earlier versions of River Vision. And so to say that the RDG plan builds on the foundation of that is like saying we're tearing down the building that River Vision created and we're building on top of it, which I think is something we really don't want. What I propose instead of that is an expansion of this so that from Perry Street to Pershing Street, the dam especially, from the dam to Perry Street, we actually reestablish this with its limestone wall that right now is buried, and with its angled brick beach, the landing of Davenport, I think needs to be reestablished. That was the landing that, before the bridge was made, was our only way to get in touch with the outside world. It's the landing that George Davenport came to Davenport on. It's the landing that Antoine Leclerc used. It's the landing that Dred Scott was introduced to our area with. It's the landing that Abraham Lincoln saw when he was making the litigation in favor of the bridge. So the landing, I think, is something if we dispense with it, and all we have left is the name Main Street Landing, we're doing our history and our citizens a disservice. So I think we need to start with that. If we're going to use the name Main Street Landing, it should be with a sense of deep irony, which I don't think is what we want. So let me look beyond that. Number one is, and I'm happy to see the flooding issue being resolved today, or discussed. I think having a raised bike path on the riverside of the railroad tracks at the 21.5 elevation, using impervious clay going from the dam to Crescent Bridge, is something we really ought to consider. Essentially, become a promenade. And essentially, that'd be the point that we retreat. So that normally, of course, our riverfront that we have is what we'd have, but during a flood, we retreat to that promenade at the 21.5 elevation. And I think other things that I'd like to see Beiderbecke Drive, which, you know, the recent work has really been tremendous, but the west end of it peters off to nothing. It's not in the RDG plan. I'd like to see some type of appropriate memorial to Bix Beiderbecke at that point, perhaps a fountain. Perhaps we see him blowing his horn with running shoes. He was a young man when he died. He'd be running the Bix if it was going on at his time. So some kind of fountain there. I'd like to see Beiderbecke Drive continued eastward to Pershing Street, so that people can go from Pershing Street crossing all the way down to Bix Beiderbecke Drive, see that fountain, and you'll have a great view of the river. If we want to close off part of it during periods where we have lots of people, no problem. But it would essentially create a lot of access for it. This maybe hasn't been discussed.
That was your 5 minutes there.
Okay. Well, move the farmer's market to the flex spaces, and move our Bix Beiderbecke Festival from 2nd Street down to River Drive. Thanks.
All right. I don't see anyone else with public, so I'm ready for adjournment. Second. Okay, all in favor? We're adjourned.